Machine works in 30 minutes. The economy works like a simple machine. But many people don't understand it, all they don't agree on how it works. And this has led to a lot of Middle East economic suffering. I feel a deep sense of responsibility to share my simple but practical economic plan template. Though it's unconventional, it has helped me to anticipate and to sidestep for global financial crisis, and it has worked well for me for over 30 years. Let's begin. Though the economy may seem complex, it works in a simple mechanical way. It's made up of a few simple parts and a lot of simple transactions, and they're repeated over and over again a zillion times. These transactions are all more or less driven by human nature, and they create three main forces that drive the economy. Number one, productivity growth. Number two, short-term debt cycle. Number three, long-term debt cycle. We look at these three forces and now laying them on top of each other, create out a good template of tracking economic movements and figuring out what's happening now. Let's start with the simplest part of economic transaction. An economy is simply the sum of the transactions that make it up. And transaction is a very simple thing. You make a transaction all the time. Every time you buy something, you create a transaction. Each transaction consists of a buyer exchanging money or credit with a seller for goods, services, or financial assets. Credit spends as direct money. So adding together the money spent and the amount of credit spent, you could know the total spending. The total amount of spending drives the economy. If you divide the amount spent by the quantity sold, you get a price. And that's it. That's a transaction. It's the building block of the economic machine. All core cycle in all processes in economy are driven by transactions. So, if we can understand transactions, we can understand the whole economy. A market consists of all the buyers and all the sellers making transactions for the same thing. For example, there is a world market, a current market, a stock market, and market for millions of things. An economy consists of all the transactions in all of its market. If you add up total spending and the total quantity sold in all the market, everything you need to understand the economy. It's just that simple. People, businesses, banks, and governments all engage in transactions the way I just described, exchanging money and credit for goods, services, or in financial assets. The biggest buyer and seller is the government, which consists of the two important parts: a central government that collects your taxes and spends money, and central bank, which is different from the buyers and sellers because it controls the amount of money and credit in the economy. It does it as pronouncing interest rates and printing new money. For these reasons, as always say, the central bank is an important player in the flow of credit. I want you to pay attention to credit. Credit is the most important part of the economy and probably the least understood. It's the most important part because it's the biggest and most volatile part. That's why buyers and sellers go to the market to make transactions so to lenders and borrowers. Lenders usually want to make their money into more money, and borrowers usually want to buy something they can afford, like a house or a car, or they want to invest in something like starting a business. Credit helps both lenders and borrowers get what they want. The borrowers promise to repay the amount they borrow, called principal, plus an additional amount called interest. When interest rates are high, there is less borrowing because it's expensive. When interest rates are low, borrowing increases because it's cheaper. When borrowers promise to repay, and lenders believe them, and credit is created. And need to people calculate credit out of thin air. That's simple enough. But credit is tricky because it has different names. As soon as credit is created, it immediately turns into debt. Debt is both an asset to lender and a liability to the borrower. In the future, when the borrower repays the loan plus interest, the asset and the liability is sphere and the transactions is zero. So why is credit so important? Because when a borrower receives credit, it is possible to increase the spending. And remember, spending drives the economy. This is because a person's spending is another person's income. Think about it. Every dollar you spend, someone else earns, and every dollar you earn, someone else has spent. So when you spend more, someone else earns more. When someone's incomes rise, it makes the lenders more willing to lend him money because now he was more worthy of credit. A credit-worthy borrower has to think the ability to repay the collateral. Having a lot of income in relation to his debt gives him the ability to repay. In the event that he can repay, he has valuable assets to use a collateral that can be sold. This makes lenders feel comfortable in lending him money. So increased income allows increased borrowing, which allows increased spending. And since a person's spending is another person's income, this leads to more increased borrowing and so on. But this self-enforcing pattern leads to economic growth and is why you have cycles. In a transaction, you have to give something in order to get something. And how much you get depends on how much you produce. Over time, we learn and through accumulated knowledge raises our living standards. We call this productivity growth. Those who are inventive and hardworking raise their productivity and their living standards faster than those who are complacent and lazy. But that isn't necessarily true over the short run. Productivity matters most in the long run, but credit matters most in the short run. This is because productivity growth doesn't fluctuate much, so it's not a big driver in economic swings. That is because it allows us to consume more than we produce when we feel required, and it forces us to consume less than we produce when you have to pay it back. That swings occur into big cycles. When one takes about 5 years and the other takes about 75 to 100 years. While most people feel the swings, they typically don't see them as cycles because they see them to occur day by day, week by week. In this chapter, we are going to step back to look at these three big forces and how they interact to make up our experiences. As mentioned, the swings around and around are not to them how much innovation or hard work there is. There is primarily due to how much credit there is. Let's for a second imagine an economy without credit. In this economy, the only way I can increase my spending is to increase my income, which requires me to be more productive and do more work. Increases productivity is the only way for growth, since my spending is another person's income. The economy grows every time I grow and anyone else is more productive. If we follow the transactions and place this out, we see a progression like the productivity growth line. But because we borrow, we have a cycle. This isn't due day and raw regulation. It's the human nature and the way the credit works. Think of borrowing as a simple way pulling spending forward. In order to buy something you can afford, you need to spend more than you make. To do this, you essentially need to borrow your from future self. And doing so, you create time in the future, then you need to spend less than you make in order to repay it back. It very quickly resembles a cycle. Basically, anytime you borrow, you create a cycle. This is true for the individual as it is for the economy. This is my understanding credit is so important because it sets into motion a mechanically predictable series of events that will happen in the future. This makes credit different from money. Money is what you settle transactions with. When you buy a beer from a bartender with cash, the transaction is settled immediately. But when you buy a beer with credit, it's like starting a bartender. You stay saying you promise to pay in the future. Together, you and bartender create a asset and a liability. You just create credit out of thin air. It's not until you pay the bartender rather that the asset and the liability disappear. That debt goes away and the transaction is settled. The reality is that most of what people call money is actually credit. The total amount of credit in the United States is about $50 trillion. and the total amount of money is only about $3 trillion. Remember, in an economy without credit, the only way to increase your spending is to produce more. For an economy with credit, you can also increase your spending by borrowing. As a result, an economy with credit is more spending and allows incomes to rise faster than productivity over the short run, but not over the long run. Not don't get me wrong, credit is necessarily something bad that just causes cycles. It's bad when it finances overconsumption that can't be paid back. However, it's good when it purely allocates resources and produces income so you can pay back the debt. For example, if you borrow money to buy back big TV, if it doesn't generate income for you, pay back to that. When you borrow money buy your tractor, and the tractor lets you harvest more crops and earn more money, then you can pay back your debt and improve your living standard. In an economy with credit, we can follow the transactions and see how credit grows. Let me give you some example. Suppose you earn $100,000 a year and have no debt. Your credit worth enough to borrow $10,000, say on a credit card. So you can spend $100,000 even though you earn $100,000. Since your spending is another person's income, someone is earning $110,000. A person earning $10,000 with no debt can borrow $11,000, so he can spend $121,000. Even though he has only earned $110,000, his spending is another person's income, and by following the transaction, we can begin to see how this process works in a self-reinforcing pattern. But remember, borrowing creates cycles, and if the cycle goes up, it eventually needs to come down. This leads us to ensure short-term debt cycle. As economic activity increases with expansion, the first phase of the short-term debt cycle, spending continues to increase since prices start to rise. This happens because an increase in spending is fueled by credit, which can be credited into credit out of thin air. When your amount of spending incomes grow faster than the production of goods, prices rise. When prices rise, we call this inflation. The central bank doesn't want too much inflation because it causes a problem. Seeing price rise, it raises interest rate. With higher interest rates, fewer people can afford to borrow money, and the cost of existing debt rise. Think about it, is the monthly payments on your credit card going up? Because people borrow less and have higher debt repayments, they have less money left over to spend. So spending is slow. And since one person's spending is another person's income, incomes drop and so on and so forth. When people spend less, prices go down. We call this deflation. Economic activity decreases and we have a recession. If the recession becomes too severe and inflation is no longer a problem, the central bank will lower interest rates to cause everything to pick up again. With the long interest rates, debt repayments are reduced and borrowing and spending pick up, and you see another expansion. As you can see, the economy works like a machine. In the short-term debt cycle, spending is constrained only by the willingness of lenders and borrowers to provide and receive credit. When credit is easily available, there's an economic expansion. When credit is easily available, there's a recession. And note that this cycle is controlled primarily by the central bank. The short-term debt cycle typically lasts 5 to 8 years and happens over and over again for decades. But notice that the bottom and top of each cycle finish with more rent growth in the previous cycle and with more debt. Why? Because people proceeded. They have an inclination to borrow and spend more instead of paying back debt. It's human nature. Because of this, over long periods of time, debt rises faster and then incomes, create the long-term debt cycle. Despite people becoming more indebted, lenders even more poorly extend credit. Why? Because everyone thinks things are going great. People are just focused on what's been happening lately. What's been happening lately? Incomes have been rising as the value are growing up. The stock market loses its boom. It's paid back by goods, services, and financial assets. We borrow money. When people do out of debt, we call it bubble. So even the debts have been growing, incomes have been growing nearly as fast upside down. Let's call the ratio of debt to income debt burden. So long as incomes continue to rise, the debt burden stays manageable. At the same time, asset value is lower. People borrowing huge amounts of money to buy assets, investments, causing the prices to rise even higher. People feel worthy. So even with the accumulation of lots of debt, rising incomes and asset value help borrowers remain creditworthy for a long time. But this ability cannot continue forever, and it doesn't. Over the decades, debt burden slowly increases, creating larger and larger debt repayments. At some point, debt repayments start growing faster than incomes, forcing people to cut back on their spending. And since one person's spending is another person's income, incomes begin to go down, which makes people less creditworthy, causing borrowing to go down. Debt repayments continue to rise, which makes the spending drop even further, and the cycle reverses itself. This is the long-term debt peak. Debt burdens have simply become too big. For the United States, Europe, and much of the rest of the world, this has happened in 2008. It happened for the same reason it happened in Japan in 1989, and in the United States back in 1989. Now the economy begins deleveraging. In the deleveraging, people cut spending, incomes fall, credit disappears, asset prices drop, banks get squeezed. The stock market crashes, social tensions rise, and the whole thing starts to feed on itself the other way. As incomes fall and repayments rise, borrowers get squeezed. No longer creditworthy, credit drives up, and borrowers can no longer borrow enough money to make their debt repayments. Scrambling to fill this hole, borrowers are forced to sell assets. The rush to sell assets for the market at the same time as spending fall. This is when the stock market collapses and the real estate market and banks get into trouble, asset prices drop, and value of the collateral borrowers can put up drops. This makes borrowers even less creditworthy. People credit repeated this fear. Less spending, less incomes, less worth, less credit, less borrowing, and so on. It's a vicious cycle. This appears similar to recession, but the difference here is that interest rates can't lower to save the debt. In a recession, lowering interest rates works to stimulate borrowing. However, in a deleveraging, lowering interest rates doesn't work because interest rates are low and soon hit 0%. So the stimulation ends. Interest rates in the United States hit 0% during the deleveraging of the 1930s and again in 2008. The difference between a recession and deleveraging is that in a deleveraging, borrowers' debt burdens have simply gotten too big and can't be relieved by lowering interest rates. Lenders realize that debt become too large to ever be fully paid back. Borrowers have lost their ability to repay, their collateral has lost value. They feel crippled by the debt. They don't even want more. Lenders stop lending, borrowers stop borrowing. Think of the economy as being not creditworthy, just like an individual. So what do you do about the leveraging? The problem is that burdens are too high and must come down. There are multiple ways this can happen. 1. People, business, and governments cut their spending. 2. Debt are reduced through default and restructure. 3. And from the haves to have-nots. And finally 4. The central bank prints new money. These 4 ways perhaps in every deleveraging in modern history. Usually spending is cut first. As we just people, business, and even government tie their belts and cut their spending so they can pay down their bad debt. This is often referred to as austerity. When borrowers stop taking on new debt and start paying down old debt, you might expect the debt burden to decrease. But the opposite happens because spending is gone. And one month spending is another man's income. It causes incomes to fall. They fall faster than they've already paid, and that burden actually gets worse. As we think, this cut spending is deflationary and painful. Businesses are forced to cut costs, which means less jobs and higher employment. This leads to the next step. Debt must be reduced. Many borrowers find themselves unable to repay their loans, and borrowers' debt are rendered success. When a borrower does repay the bank, people get nervous that bank won't be able to repay them, so they resort to withdraw money from the bank. Banks get squeezed, and people, business, and banks default on their debt. This severe economic contraction is a depression. A big part of depression is people discovering much of the what was their world is really there. Let's go back to the bar. When you bought a beer and put it on a bar tab, you promised to repay the bar tab. You promise became an asset of the bartender. When you break your promise, you can pay back essentially the part on your bar tab. Then your asset is really worth anything. It has basically disappeared. Many lenders don't want their asset to disappear and agree to debt restructuring. Debt restructuring means lenders can pay back less or get paid back over a long time frame or a low interest rates than was first agreed. Somehow, a contract or broken in the way that repurchase them. Lenders would rather have a little of something and or of nothing. Even though debt disappears, debt restructuring causes incomes and asset value to disappear faster. So the debt burden continues to work. Like current spending, debt reduction is also painful and deflationary. All of this impacts the central government because lower incomes and less employment means the government collects fewer taxes. At the same time, it's remembered to increase its spending because employment has risen. Many of employed have in a quiet saving and in the financial support from the government. Additionally, government creates stimuli plans and increases their spending to make up for the decreases in the economy. Government project that deficits efforts in the leveraging because they're spending more than they earn in taxes. This is the happening when you have the project deficits on the news. To fund their deficit, governments need to either raise its taxes or borrow money. But with incomes falling and so many unemployed, who is the money going to come from? The rich. Since government need more money since the world heavily concentrated the hands of a small percentage of the people, government naturally raises taxes and wealthy, which facilitates a reduced distribution of the wealthy in the economy for the haves to have-nots. But have-nots who are suffering begin to resent the world haves. The world has been squeezed by the weak economy, falling asset prices, and higher taxes. Begin to resent to have-nots. If the depression continues, social disorder can break out. Not only tension rises with countries, they can rise between countries, special battle in credible countries. In this situation can lead to political change that can sometimes too extreme. In the 1930s, this led to Hitler coming to pure power over the Europe and depression in the United States. The pressure to do something to end the depression increases. Remember, most of our people don't most money actually credits. So when credit is fear, people don't enough money. People don't have enough money. People need to spend for money, and you remember who are printing money. The central bank can. Having already lowered interest rates to near zero, it's forced to print money, unlike income spending, the reduction, and worthy distribution, printing money inflationary and stimulus. Inevitably, the central bank prints the new money out of thin air and they use it to buy financial and government bonds. It happened in the United States during the Great Depression and again in 2008 when the United States Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, printed over $2 trillion. Other central banks around the other countries to money. Two, by buying financial assets with this money, it helps drive asset prices, which makes people more creditworthy. However, this only helps those who want financial assets. You see, the central bank can print money, but economy and financial assets. The central government on the other can buy goods and services and put money in the hands of the people, but it can't print money. So in order to stimulate the economy, the two must cooperate. By buying government bonds, the central bank essentially lend money to government, allowing it to run deficit and increase its spending on goods and services through its stimulus programs and employment benefit. This increases people's income as well as the government's debt. However, it will over the economy toward their burden. This is a very risky time. Policymakers need to balance the four ways that their burdens come down. The deflationary ways to need balance with the inflationary way in order to maintain stability. A balanced collectively there can be beautiful deleveraging. You see, but the deleveraging can be ugly or it can be beautiful. How can I deleveraging beautiful? Even though deleveraging is a difficult situation, handling a difficult situation in the most best possible way beautiful. A lot more beautiful the content is accessed at the leveraging phase. In a beautiful deleveraging, debt decline relative to income, real economic growth is positive, and inflation is the problem. It is achieved by having the right balance. The right balance requires a certain mix of carry stand, reducing debt, and printing money so the economy and social stability can be maintained. People ask printing money as relates inflation. You don't offset foreign credit. Remember, spending is what matters. A dollar spent paid for money has the same price the dollars of spending for a paid for with credit. By printing money, the central bank can make up for the discretion of credit without increasing the amount of money. In order to run things up, the central bank needs to not only form of income growth, but get the rate of income go higher than the rate of interest debt. Accumulated net. So what do I mean by that? Basic income needs to grow faster than debt grows. For example, let's assume it's a country the leveraging is a debt to income ratio of 10. The main amount of debt it has is the same in income the country makes in a year. Now think about interest rate on the debt. It says 2%. Its debt is growing 2% because of the interest rates. Income is only growing at around 1%. You will never reduce the debt burden. You need to print enough money to get the rate of income growing above the rate interest. However, printing money could easily because easy to the people perfect into the alternative. The key is to avoid printing too much money and causing unacceptably high inflation the way Germany did during the leverage in 92. In policymakers achieve the right balance, or the leveraging is so dramatic. Growth is slow, but debt burdens go down. That's beautiful leveraging. When incomes begin to rise, borrowers begin to appear more creditworthy. And when borrowers appear more creditworthy, lenders begin to lend money again. Debt burdens finally begin to fall. Able to borrow money, people can spend more. Eventually, the economy begins to grow again, leading to the reparation for the long-term debt cycle. Though the delivery process can be horrible if handled badly. If handled well, it eventually fixes the problem. It takes roughly a decade or more for debt burdens to fair economic activity to get back to normal. Hence, the return last decade. In closing, Of course, the economy is a little bit more complicated than this template suggests. However, range the short-term debt cycle top of the long-term debt cycle and the long-term from productivity growth and gives a reasonably good template to think or reaping where we are probably had. So in summary, this is three rules that I'd like to take away from this. First, don't have debt rise faster than income because your debt burdens will eventually crush you. Second, don't have incomes rise faster than productivity because you will eventually become incomparable. And third, you do all that you can to raise your productivity because in the long run, that's what matters most. This is simple advice for you and simple advice for policymakers. You might be surprised, but most people, including most policymakers, don't pay enough attention to this. This template has worked for me and I hope will work for you. Thank you.